All right. Welcome, everyone. Let's give everybody a couple more minutes. To be graded. Okay. Yeah, send a message to the TAs. All right, Vino, I sent a message to the TAs. All right, let's get started. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So today we're going to be talking about Redux and application state management in general. Right? Redux is one of many solutions to maintain application-wide state, right? To simplify mechanisms for components and screens across multiple places in your application to share and information, right? That they can all populate a central place that can then be reused by many other components. Okay. So the last time we met, we talked about state management, but using the use state hook, and we worked through most of the exercises in the assignment, and I shared that with you in GitHub. Please, feel free to reuse that as you like, right? You can use it as your own. And we discussed that there were some limitations. We're going to go over those again today, and then propose Redux as an alternative, as a way to solve some of those issues, while still perhaps using use state where it is appropriate. Right? We'll talk about when it is appropriate to use local component-based state, right? Using use state or using Redux for sharing state across multiple components, right? So that's the topic for today. Also, so we'll keep working through some of the exercises that are we post here in the assignment, and perhaps get you started on Canvas as well. So the exam is not today; it is next week. And the exam will be available for several days, right? So you can choose whenever it's better for you to take the exam. You can come to my during the lecture time next at the end of next week. If you want to take it during the lecture time, you don't have to. You can take it in the next couple of days as well, right? So whenever you find a a hole in there, 100 minutes, you can take the exam whenever you feel more comfortable, right? The material will be up until what we covered earlier this week, right? The a component state using the use state hook. It's not going to contain any Redux questions, right? So everything up to what we discussed earlier this week, including HTML, CSS, certainly JavaScript, lots of questions about common uses of JavaScript, like arrays and primitive data types, objects, right? Also some of the cool operations and functions and features such as spreader, the spreader syntax, right, where you can copy arrays on top of other arrays or objects within other objects, and how you can use you can declare new variables that can override older variables, right? Also the destructor syntax, right, where you can give an object and destruct the items inside from the object, right, into new constants. Same thing with the array destructors, right? Also the function destructor, that you can pass objects to a function, and the function can then destruct the properties that it wants, right? And I mean, we've been using it for quite a while, certainly in the assignments and in Canvas and all the exercises that we've been going through. So you have plenty of examples. I would practice by going over those examples and exercises that are in the assignment, right? And not only do the ones that I give you, but perhaps also make your own, right? Just invent your own exercises and maybe tweaking one of the ones that I'm giving you, right? So that you can try to solve those problems yourself, right, from scratch, and so tweaking it, you can see, what if I change this little piece here, that little piece there? Is it behaving like you expect, right? Can you explain all the behaviors? All my questions are going to be mostly fill in the blank, right, and multiple choice, true, false, acronyms. Make sure you know your acronyms, and usually I give you kind of like little puzzles, right, where I ask you, hey, what happens if you click this 3 times and click that 4 times, right? What does a variable a dot b end up being, right? Or vice versa. I'll tell you, I want variable z dot x to be 23. Fill in the blank so that it happens, right? That sort of thing. Okay. So earlier next in the week, we're gonna go over questions from prior exams, prior semesters, and we'll solve them here together in class. I'll share with you a PDF with questions over the weekend, right, so you can have an idea of what to expect. What else? So the assignment 3 is due tonight, and assignment 4 won't be due for another 2 weeks, right? So even though we've already started with assignment 4, we covered quite a bit of the material for assignment 4. It won't be due for another 2 weeks. Right? So this week is we're almost wrapping up assignment 4, the coverage of the material. We'll probably do some more early next week after we review the midterm. We'll do some more work on the assignment 4, but the focus is going to change after the midterm, right? So after exam 1, right, we're going to start focusing more on the server side, right? We're going to learn how to create our own HTTP servers from scratch using Node.js and Express, and start moving a lot of the data structures and data management that we now have in the front end, right? For instance, the database object that we're using in the front end, right, that contains courses and assignments and modules, right? All those should actually live on the server side, not on the client. Right now, it's on the client because we don't have a server. So we're going to move all that to the server, and then put it ultimately where it belongs in the database, right? So first we'll talk about the Node server, and we'll learn how to create asynchronous resources that can be invoked from the client, and then finally we'll put it in the database. Also, right when we come back from exam 1, I'm going to start creating a demo, right, of what I intend. I'm going to follow the requirements of the project, right? I'm going to demonstrate what the various requirements mean, right? Just to make sure that we're all on the same page of what is expected of you to create the project. So right after the exam, I'll start working on a prototype of a project, right? And so we'll illustrate what we mean by a search page, and that it queries a third-party API, that it comes back with results. You can click it and then go to a details page. The details page can have, goes out to the API again, retrieves, detailed information and renders a detailed screen, and folks can interact with it, either like it or leave a review, right? Interact with information that other folks have created. So I'll start creating a demo for you so that you can see exactly what we mean by many of those requirements. Okay. What else? I think that's it. Any questions? Let's see the question in the chat. It's a question. Hello, Professor. Had a question. When we call set count on any set state method, and just after that we try to access the variable, why do we get the updated value? React should be batching the updates right, and not just after it. Actually, yeah, you should not rely on the value being updated. It is not. It's asynchronous, and yes, you're correct. It does batch all those updates, and it might work, it might not work. It's undetermined, right? That if you use a setter, it is not guaranteed that the value will be immediately updated, right? Only when it re-renders, right? Because when it changes, it forces a re-render, and then after it re-renders, then you have the actual value, right? That you can count with having been updated. For that, to guarantee that you're using always the latest one, what we would use is a use state, which we haven't talked about. So use state is a function that gets invoked every time the application the component gets re-rendered, and that's where you can initialize your state, right? And make sure that you are working with the latest version of all your app state variables. So yeah, so don't assume that the value is updated immediately, right? And only for display purposes, right? You can assume that it will be updated. So yeah, don't use it in your in any logic, right? If you need it, then wrap around the update of the value as part of that logic, right? So don't assume that it's updated immediately. Okay. All right. I also wanted to know what are higher order components, when and how to use them. Yeah, so higher order components is that, for instance, if you don't like, for instance, how your UL works, right, or your buttons work in HTML, you can wrap them inside a component, a React component that has most of the attributes that already are supported by the regular HTML component tags, right? But you usually you declare a function, a new component that is called button. Even though there is a button HTML button, right? You can create your own React.js button, and which maybe combine a lot of behavior that the default out of the box button doesn't have, right? And so there are a lot of these libraries, React.js libraries, that declare these they call high level components, right? That are meant to be used like these user interface UI high level components, right? That encapsulate, for instance, link in React Redux is a version of a high level component. It eventually renders as a hyperlink, but it adds a lot of behaviors that are not supported by the native anchors, right? The hyperlinks, such as working with hashes and forcing a navigation to a route, right? So it it behaves like a hyperlink, it renders like a hyperlink, but right, it has its own infrastructure, it has its own behind the scenes magic, right? That only link and route know about themselves, right? Yeah. So and for instance, the UL, right? You could create your own ULs for unordered lists that behave more powerfully than the regular ULs. For instance, you could create a UL that you can give it an attribute that connects it to an API where it can go fetch data, right? So it can fetch its data and it renders it like a list, right? And then renders it nicely, in various in line items, right? That represent each one of the objects and records that come back from a database, right? So that's a very powerful UL version, right? That instead of you hard coding and mapping your array, it actually goes out into some third-party API, retrieves data, and then just renders it right there. So that's that. Or you could do the same thing with a table, right? A table, you could create a table that you can configure, for instance, a query that goes out to a database and retrieves an array of objects, right? And then renders it in the table format. So yeah, so some really powerful things that you could do to implement your higher order components. And all this you can do already, right? We're going to be able to do all these things. All right, great questions. Let's go. All right, let's see. Yeah, so we had, I believe we had started talking about Redux. We have finished all the use state exercises, right, on how to manage state within a component, right? And so we discussed several examples where we were using use state to maintain state for simple data types like strings, integers, right, Boolean, objects, arrays, right? And we went through all those, and also discussed the fact that all those examples were holding a state variable, right? And they were manipulating the state variable, but then all that data was only available within that component, right? It was rendering it, right? You had the data, and there's two distinct things here, right? We have the data itself and the functions that manipulate the data, and then you have another part that does the rendering, and they're kind of like two distinct parts, right? So we'll come back to that in a minute. And then we talked about that one, if this component gets out of hand or very complex, we said that we might want to break a complex component into smaller ones, but then if then the question is, how do you share the state between these two components? It used to be one component, right, with one state, with all the functions that manipulate the state and whatnot. But now you break it into multiple components. Who's going to own the state? How is that they're going to share that state? And we created a trivial example where we had a state variable here, and then we declared a parent component that then had a child component. And the way they shared the state and the logic of updating that state is by passing references to the state, right, and the functions to the child states, right? And that seemed to work fine. And but the question is, what happens if instead of just being one parent, right, and instead you have multiple children, right, or even a long hierarchy of elements, right, where you have the state in the root, but the state is needed, somewhere down here in the leaves of a long chain. You would have to pass, through these attributes, right, through these attributes and properties, right, and these attributes from the top down to all the children, all the way down to the leaf where the state is needed. It might be that all the intermediate components, right, don't even care about that state, right? And they are mostly ignoring that state. It is only needed somewhere deep down in one of the components, right? But nevertheless, you have to have all these attributes that are passing the data, from one component to the next component, until it reaches where it's actually needed, right? So this creates a challenge of maintenance, right, where you have all these attributes, passing data down, right, passing functions up, that you have to maintain, and also, if you ever want to maybe reuse any of the components right here in the middle, and you want to reuse it somewhere else, well, that component already has explicitly declared that it has dependencies of between itself and the parent already, because you have attributes flowing down. If you move it elsewhere in the application, maybe in a different screen, you want to reuse that component, you would have to recreate that dependency tree, right? All the attributes and all the whatnot that you have to pass it and whatnot. Also, you can't just rip it out, right, and use it somewhere else and move it out, right? Because if you rip it, then you are breaking the chain of dependencies from the two ends, right? So you would have to reconnect the plumbing, right, between, if you have to move that component elsewhere. So I mean, it's fine using useState and attributes and passing things down and whatnot, but it has its challenges. So what we really want to do is separate the two concerns. We want to separate the fact that we need to maintain and update a state, right, which is we use the useState, and then so that's one thing. That's something we need to do. But then you also have the issue of reading that state, right, rendering that state, right, and then notifying some event handlers, when that state should change and what the new value should be. Okay, so those are two sets of concerns, right? One is the mechanism by which we represent that state or that data structure, where it lives, okay, and all the functions that are needed to update that state, right? And for instance, here would be an example, right? The state is this array, the data structure is this array, and the updating functions are these add element, delete elements are operating on that state, right? So that's one set of concerns of how do you maintain that? How do you represent that? Here we're using this particular representation using useState, right? So that's one issue. And the other one is I need, somebody has to render that state, right, to give feedback to the user that the state is changing. So there it is. So we're rendering here the item. And also it needs to be able to invoke the functions that manipulate the state, right, as a result of some user event of folks clicking or tapping or dragging or something, doing something to the user interface that we have to notify that the state should change. So that's another set of issues, right? So those two concerns, right now, they coexist in one component. Okay. And the problem is that what if we want to give access to the state and those functions to other folks, right? So the only way that we know how to do that is to just, if you have two components, right, that are in a hierarchy, well, they can pass, the one above can pass the state down, right? But what if those components are not in a hierarchy, are maybe siblings of each other, right? Or one lives in a screen over here and this one lives in another screen. There's no hierarchy between them at all, right? How do we send information between themselves? So the only way that we know how to do right now would be to create a parent, right? A parent of the two, a one that has a common ancestor that has the state, right? We can move the state to a common ancestor, and then that ancestor can share with both of us, right? There's a question in the chat. Yeah, exactly. Move up one pair. Exactly. And then you can share and send it down. So that's a solution that we know using useState, and that's a very legitimate solution. That's a very legitimate solution. In fact, I ask you to do that in the Canvas as an exercise, right? That you need to do that. But again, you have the concern of if the hierarchy of this parent and where that state is needed, if it's a very long change, right? You have these brittleness of dependency between the various components in the tree of where the state lives way up here, right? And how it's shared down there, right? So one solution, right? Okay, yeah, move it up. That's one solution. The other solution is that what if you now need to share with someone else? Well, I need to move it up, right? And if anyone needed to share it with someone else, well, maybe I need to move it up higher, right? And someone might say, well, why don't you just put it at the root component, right? And then that root component can then just share with everybody. Again, you have the problem of creating these very strong dependencies between the components that if you want to move them around, right, then your application becomes susceptible to breaking, right, or very brittle if you want to move things around and re-architect things, right? So instead, right, another alternative is to separate these two concerns, right, which is a very common good practice in software engineering, of separation of concerns. You identify the concerns. There are two distinct concerns, right? And then you implement it separately, and then you need some mechanism of gluing them together somehow, right? But if you want to separate them, what we're going to do is that we're going to move this out of here. We're going to move it out of here. It's not going to live in any one component, okay? And then we're going to have to make a mechanism by which this view needs to be able to still read from this and send the messages, right, for update, right? And so we're going to follow more or less what we did for the database. Remember, we did the database. We created courses and assignments and modules. We put them in one single mega object, right? And we called it the database, right? And it was just basically an object that collected multiple arrays, right, in one single meta object. So the approach that we're going to do is follows that mechanism, right? So this is going to be moved outside. It's going to populate the data into a common storage, where you're going to be able to dump in there all the data that needs to be shared amongst everybody, right? So for instance, you might have the courses in there and the assignments and the modules, right? And the students, blah, 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 right? And along with all the functions that are responsible for manipulating all that data structure, right? So for that, we're going to introduce, introduce Redux. Redux is one of several libraries that try to solve this issue, right? There's Redux, there's use context also, which is part of the React library, that tries to separate these two things, right? And then we need to be able to glue them together. So let's learn how to use Redux to solve this problem. Okay, so let's see. Let's create first a component where we're going to be working and solving all our Redux related exercises. Okay, so let's create here a file. We'll call it the Redux examples. Oh wait, this is supposed to be a folder. Copy that and delete. Let's create a folder. And let's create the index. And in there, we're going to put the content, Redux examples, right? And we're going to include that in our assignment 4. So this would be Redux example. There we go. So that I believe this is the app, and we can go to the labs. And there's assignment 4, and here's where we're going to have our Redux examples, right? So let me make this full screen, and so that we can add it to our code here, so we can see this side by side. Okay, there we go. Okay, so let's create our very first Hello World Redux example. Okay, so let's create here a component, trivial component, right? We'll call it the Hello Redux. And in here you have index.js, and we'll do function Hello Redux. Okay. And typically, like all components that maintain their own state, right now the only way that we know how to do that is to declare here say we have a message and we have a set message, and right now it says hello world. Let's say it says hello world. Okay. And to render this, it's trivial, right? We're going to do return, and this renders there we go, right? So we have a hello Redux, and here's the message, right? And then if we click on this input field, actually no, let's do something easier. Let's just this be a button. So button that we set the message, and so we say on click, we say set message, and they'll say hello Redux. Okay. All right, and we render the actual message down here. So we'll need to import the use state, and we'll have to export this. So we can then go to the Redux examples, and let's import our new Hello Redux example. So there it is, right? If I click, then it sets it to Hello Redux. Something trivial, right? So it used to be Hello World. If I click the button, it sets it to set Redux. Simple. Okay. All right. So we want to separate and move this out of here, right? And the intent is that if I want to share and make this message that only lives here, it's only available in here. If I want to make it broadly available everywhere, right, it can't live in here, right? So how do we do that? What we're going to do is that we're going to create a separate file, that is going to be the hello reducer.js. And here's where the state is going to live. In here, we're going to declare an initial state where we have the message, right? That initially is what? Initially is hello world. Like that. Yeah. Like that. So that's my initial state, which it's this. So this is equivalent to that, right? Okay. But now it no longer lives in here. Well, still lives in here, but we want to replace this. We want to replace it. If I do this, it's going to break. So I don't want to remove it just yet. We want to replace this with somehow me accessing this outside. Yes. So to do this, we're going to wrap this inside of an infrastructure called Redux, right? That is going to allow us to fetch this information, right? And it's also going to allow us to update the information, okay? But since it doesn't live inside of the component, it's actually going to be available everywhere, right? Let's see, chat, question on the chat. Does it need to be an object? Yes, it does. Yes, it has a very specific syntax. It's an object, and these are the state variables. We call them the Redux state variables. And these are their values. And these values can be strings, just like the state variables can be strings, Boolean, integers, objects, arrays. These two, right? These could be simple strings, or it could be an entire object, could be, fairly complex arrays and whatnot, right? Okay, so let's wrap this inside of the infrastructure. So we're going to have the import, create slice. We need, oops, that's not create slice. There we go. And so the infrastructure is as follows. You create a function, right, with using the create slice of the Redux toolkit, right? You create the following. Okay. You name your reducer, you provide the initial state, right? And then in a option called reducers, you provide the functions that manipulate that state. Okay, so this initial state is the equivalent of this here, right? Of setting message to hello world. So this here, right here, is the equivalent of setting message is equal to that. And then in the reducers, you put all the functions that can read or write to the state. Okay. So for instance, what it does is that here we are updating the state. So this right here, right there, is the equivalent of this set message. This set message is updating the message to be hello Redux. Right. So here we're passing. Somebody would pass us the information. Would pass us this string, and it's available in this parameter here in a property called payload. Payload will contain the value of hello Redux. Okay, so this set message is not this set message, not yet. Okay, so this set message is going to replace this set message because this is going to be gone, right? That's going to go out. So this set message is also going to go out. I just happen to name them the same, right? Okay. All right. So how do we glue this so that it's visible from here? Right. So let's do it. So first of all, we are going to export the function so that we can import it from here. Right. And I think that's it. So here, what we're going to do is that we're going to, import the that, and we're going to import the set message from the reducer, so that we're not going to need this anymore. So that set message is gone. Now this set message is that set message, not this one. Okay, it's separate, right? Set message. Also, this set message is still tied to the use state. We don't want that. We want to be able to grab this message from here, not from this use state, because this is going to be gone, right? That's going to be gone, right? So how do we make this available? Okay, there's some more magic that needs to happen. So the way we glue this, right, is that, so I mean, the whole point is that you're going to have a lot of these reducers. Let's see, there's a question on the chat. Is the set message an original function? No. These functions, you make up what these messages, these functions are. It's whatever name you want to choose, right? The only thing that is standard is that they all receive these two arguments, the same two arguments, the state and the action, right? What are reducers? As in, they always take two parameters. Yes, they always take these two parameters, right? And reducers are basically functions that convert one data to another data, from one data representation to another data representation. It's the general definition of a reducer, right? A reducer will take a lot of information, from objects and arrays and whatnot, right? And it will reduce this into one single value. Okay? Do you need to export initial state? No, you don't, right? So we'll see in a minute how we are going to access that data. All right, so the magic is as follows, right? If you remember in our database example, right, we collect all the data, right? We inside of an index.js, and we say, okay, well, all our pieces of data are all JSON files, and we are collating them all into this meta object. Yes? So we're going to do something similar, but a little more involved, right? So instead of a database, we're going to create what is called a store, right? Just like our database is collecting all the data into one big object, the store is going to collect all the data from multiple reducers, right? Just like all these arrays are used in different screens. Like, for instance, courses is used in the dashboard to render all the courses, right? The assignments are used in the assignment screen to render all the assignments. And the modules is used in two screens, right? In the home screen and in the module screen to render the module. Yes? Well, same thing. The reducer, we're going to have reducers for different screens, right? For different components. Here we have a reducer for a particular component, but it could be a reducer for an entire screen, right? It could be the shopping cart screen, the screen where you do the checkout, the screen where you have your profile information, where you search for products and you navigate through the products, right? So each one with different reducers, but then all that data is going to be collated into one single place, right? Which is going to be a store. So a store is like our database, but it's a little more involved. So let's create the store. So I'm going to create here. Let's see, a question on the chat. But with Redux having common data store, don't we give some components access to states it doesn't need? Correct. It's almost like a global space, right? It's almost like just like database, right? Just like the database, everybody can access anything they want, right? They can just say, db dot, and then they can access that particular thing. So yeah, in that sense, it is like a global state, so it has all the good stuff about the global objects, without some of the bad stuff, right? Because you still have to go through some API, right, to interact with this global state, right? And it is namespaced, right? So it's not like it's global and everybody can see everything. It's within a particular space, right? And usually within a particular screen, right? You stay within that particular namespace. Although you can, if you want, change namespace and go and retrieve whatever you want from that particular namespace, right? So yeah, it's a little better than just a global space, right? Our database is indeed a global dump, right? Where we put everything in there, everybody can see everything. So let's do it. So let's see. In labs, we're going to create a store. Let's say store. That is going to collate all our reducers. Right now, we only have one reducer. So let's import our hello reducer. Hello reducer. Wait, did we export it? Did we export our reducer? Okay. Oh no, we didn't. There we go. We export the reducer, and then in the store we can import it. Hello, there we go. Okay, there's our reducer, and we are going to configure the store. So configure store, configure this. No, that's not it. There we go, store. Yep. And then we're going to create the store, and we're going to put the reducer. Right now, only one reducer. So this is somewhat equivalent to our database, right? Of just collating, right? All in one single object, right? All the stuff that we want to retrieve from multiple places. So this is the equivalent. Now the naming that I use, it's the name. I like to use the same name as the reducer, right? So I'm just going to give it the same name. So hello reducer colon hello reducer, right? So this, like that, and we can collapse that into just hello reducer, right? Like that. Okay. So eventually we're going to put more stuff in here, right? More reducers are going to put all the data in here, and the data that is being put in here is whatever the latest state is. Right now, the state is this object, right? That contains that one single property. And as I manipulate the state, right, I am changing it, then this updates whatever this is generating, right? It's generating all this data. So this is equivalent to doing this, doing that. Doing this, like that. Okay, it's the equivalent of doing that, of putting the data in there. So if I want to retrieve it, I would do something like state dot hello reducer dot message. Okay, all right, and then we're going to export it, export the store. All right, so here's our data. Now, how do we get at it? How do we retrieve this information from here? Well, to make it available to the entire set of labs, right? To all the labs, what we do is that we're going to wrap the lab, the root of the lab, which I believe is this one. Is it the lab? Yeah. We import the store. So it's store, I believe. There we go. And we're going to provide that store to all the components in the lab. So we're going to import the provider, right, which is going to provide anybody who's in the body of the provider, anybody who's inside the provider is going to be able to access everything in there. Store is not defined. Oh, store from store. Store, configure default store, blah, 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 configure store, reducer, what does it like? Element, blah, 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 check the render, yada, 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 string for bullet, blah, 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 blah. Reducer, configure store, blah, 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 blah. Store, hello reducer, initial state, yada, yada, yada. Hello slice reducer, hello actions. What don't you like? Check the render of labs. Labs. So here's render. Return provider. What is it that don't you like? Provider. Oh, wait, provider is not being used. Oh, it's not React. It's Redux. React Redux. There we go. I imported from the wrong. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now that I've wrapped the entire set of labs with a provider, anybody in the body, right? Our future assignment 5, the assignment 4, any component inside the assignment 4, anybody in the assignment 3 from last week, right? It would be able to retrieve the data of the hello reducer. But in particular, we want the hello reducer, right? Redux, to be able to retrieve that message. We want to be able to remove this right here. And it's broken. And we want to be able to retrieve the message from the reducer. And the way we do that is using this syntax, hello, use selector. There's our hello reducer that has the object message, right? The property message with the value hello Redux, right? So we extract it, and this is a why we either do this dot message and we assign it to the message, or more commonly we just use the destructor, right, to retrieve it. And there it is. See that? The message says hello world, right? It's whatever the reducer says. So if I go into the reducer and I change this, notice that there it is. So whatever data I do, whatever I do to that state variable in the reducer is immediately reflected, in the component, right? And it re-renders, so you can see it rendered there, the latest value. Okay. All right. So the last thing that we need to do is check to see if I click on this, the set message is going to set it to hello Redux, right? And then we should see the change here immediately. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't work. Almost worked. Okay, almost worked. So it turns out that you can't directly call the function, right? If you notice the syntax is different, right? So notice that this is a string, but the set message is expecting 2 arguments, state and action. Okay, so what actually happens is that we don't directly call the function. The function gets intercepted, gets massaged, the properties get massaged, they get collated into a bigger object, and then it's passed to our function, right? And the way we do that is that we grab a dispatch. Dispatch is the one who's going to do that magic, right? And then it's going to invoke our set message function with the correct state and action, right? So we're going to wrap this in dispatch. And other than that, right? Oops. Uh-oh. Other than that, it looks very, very similar to what we already had, right? So now this works, right? So if I go and click, notice that indeed this, I'm passing the value, goes to set message, right? The value is in the payload, right? And then it gets assigned to the state message. It changes, and it forces a re-rendering of the DOM. Okay, and now this such important message of the hello component is now available anywhere you want it, right? Including, say, in the assignment 3. Let's go to our function destructing component, right? So if I go to my function destructing component, I can fetch that message from anywhere, or I can say message. What is the message from the hello component? I can say, use selector state hello reducer will need to import this like that. And now my function component can render the message. There it is. See that? Hello Redux. Right? And so here, if I refresh, initially it's hello world. Same thing in my assignment 4, it's hello world. You know? But here, if I click on it, it updates here and it updates over there. See that? It's being shared wherever you want to retrieve it. It says, why did you not write hello reducer.message? We can do that. Then we are doing this, hello reducer.message. So that works same way, works exactly the same way. But the hello reducer can contain more than one property. It can contain multiple state variables, right? And you want to extract them all at once. So instead of having multiple use selectors, right? What you do is that you retrieve the entire object, and then here you destruct. Right? That's more common syntax, but it works. In the other case, if you had multiple state variables, you would have to have a use selector for each variable and extract them one by one. This is much more compact. Okay, so let's take a look at another example. Let's see, 4. Okay, here. So let's take a look at 2 counters, right? Counters. And say, imagine you had 2 counters. So let's create one counter. So counter 1, I'll call it. That maintains a counter 1. So this is maybe function counter 1. And have here a count. Let's import here that. And let's see, we have an increment and decrement. And we have here functions, right, that allow you to increment and decrement. There we go, counter 1. And we're going to add it to our Redux example. So we're not using Redux, not yet, anyway. And so we have here counter 1. Right, so in assignment 4, you have counter 1. There it is, right? And it works fine, right? It works as expected. Okay. So imagine now you have 2 counters. You have counter 1, now you have counter 2. What if they wanted to share their counts? Right? How would you do it? So the only way that you could do that is that if one would include the other somehow, right? And actually, I wanted to call this set count 2. I wanted to separate. I wanted these distinct names. Increment, and this would be increment 2, increment 2. Let's put 2 everywhere. So it's clear, right? And this would be counter 2. Same thing with counter 1. I want to make it clear that this is count 1. And this would be count 1. And it is count 1. Okay, all right. Okay, so it still works, right? And so if we include counter 2 in our Redux example, we have counter 2, like that. And set count. Oh, did I misspell something? Set count. Oh, yeah, here. There we go. So yeah, so they both work independently. But how would you share the value of one counter with another counter? The only way would be to include one counter in the other, right? So for instance, I could include counter 1 in here, like that. Oh, like that. So this is counter 1 inside of counter 2. right, with its own variable that I can increment and decrement. And if I want to share my count2 with counter1, I need to pass it, count2 as an attribute. That's the only way that we can share data. Okay, so that counter1 can receive here counter2 from the one above, and then I can render counts2 as well. Counter. Oh wait, no. Count2. There we go. Right. So as I change in counter2, I can see the value because I'm passing it right to counter1, and counter1 can render it while changing its own local state. Make sense? Now, what if I want to share the count1 with counter2? I can't, right? Only the parent can share data down to the child, right? So how can they both see each other's count, right? Again, the way we're going to do that is by creating reducers for each one of these, right? So what we can do is do a reducer for 1. So this would be counter1 reducer. And what we do is that we're going to move out, right? We're going to move out all this from here into the reducer, right? And put them where it goes, right? So we have that. And so as a template to remember that we need to implement all this stuff, right? So we do import the configure, no, create slice, create slice. It's not called create slice. Am I misspelling it? Yeah, create slice. Yeah, okay. And let's create the initial state. So the initial state is this: count1 is 0. See that? So there we go. There's initial state. So I'm done. I'm done with this. Right? I'm done with that. And then I'm going to create the slice. The name is counter. There's increment 1. Very good. So this is that, right? So this is the equivalent of notice that the increment passes the state, right? The current state, where are we? And we calculate the next state by updating. So the state is initially this. That's what the initial state is, right? It passes to us, and then we just update the particular state variable to its new value, +1 or -1, right? Okay. So yeah, so we've done this. We don't have a set count. Let's see. Can we replace this arrow with? And no, actually no. These are. Oh, I'm sorry. These need to be like this. Arrow functions. Absolutely. Yes, these needs to be arrow functions. My AI was wrong here. Good catch. Good catch. We don't have set counts, right? But we could implement it. We could say, set count1, right? And it would be here. You would have to have not only the state, right, which get passed anyway, but the actual value gets passed in the payload of the action, right? That allows it to update the state. Very good. Then we export all those, and we import and export the reducer. We go to the store and we dump it in there. Right? We go to the store. We import the counter1 reducer, and we just make sure to register it here. Right? But I want to keep the same names like that. Okay. Now that we have that, we can go back to our counter1 and replace all this. We're going to just blow that away, and it's going to break. It doesn't work. That's okay. We're going to we're going to grab the selector and use dispatcher. We're going to grab the count1, right? We need to count 1. So from the reducer, so we say const count 1 from the reducer. There it is, right? And that's going to render that. And then we need to bring all these, increment 1 and increment 2. And to do that, we're going to import them from the reducer. There it is. Are they one up? No, they're in the same directory, no? Yeah, they're in the same directory. There we go. There we go. So we found them, but they still don't work because we need the dispatcher, right? So we'll get the dispatch. So dispatch, right? And we just wrap these click handlers with the dispatch. To do that, we're going to have to convert these into function calls like this. Right? We're going to wrap that. These are going to be a function call and dispatch. Okay, and same thing here. You know, dispatch like that. Oops, like that. Decrement 1. What are we missing? Button. Yeah, I fixed that already. Huh? Okay, there we go. It wasn't compiling. Okay, and this should work as it used to work. Yeah, so it works just fine, right? This count 2 is being passed to me, right? Because it was the only way that we knew how to share, right? But it can be shared by using a reducer. So we can do exactly the same thing that we did for count 2, right? But for counter 2, right? So we can rename this as counter 2, right? And just replace the 1s everywhere here, right? So so let's this would be blah blah. This is counter 2, right? This would be counter 2 and counter 2 over here. This is 2. This is 2, 2, 2 here, right? I guess we could do a global replace, maybe. I don't know. I'm always scared of doing global replaces. Did I miss anyone? Oh, yeah, these over here, right? So that one, and that one. Okay. And then we can dump this reducer inside the inside of the store, counter reduce. Did I export it? Did I export it? Yeah. I guess we have to import it. Import counter 2 reducer and just declare it in here. There we go. Right now we can refactor this instead of you having to pass count 2, right? Instead of doing that, I can just grab it from the other reducer, count 2 from counter 2 reducer. See that? Right? I can read it as 0 right now. Okay, and so I can replace my counter 2. If I go to my counter 2, I can replace this use state, right, with the equivalent from the reducer. Right? Again, we're going to grab the count from the reducer, right, and these functions, right. We need to wrap them in a closure, right. We're going to wrap them in closure. And these don't exist. We need to import them. So we say, yeah, those and all these functions. There we go. So I'm reading the count 2 correctly being displayed. I don't need to pass this anymore. I don't need to pass it anymore because it's grabbing the count 2 from the reducer instead. I no longer have the dependency, right, of having to pass anything to my children. They can grab it from global space, right? And then we can, get the dispatch here, and we can wrap these guys, right? We can wrap this so that this also works. Okay. Why you did not use provider in this case? Oh yeah, no, we already declared it, right? Yeah, so we did. As long as you keep updating the store, right? Whatever you keep adding to the store, right? The whatever you keep adding to the store is being provided, right? Is being provided at the root of the labs. So at the root of the labs here, we have the provider. So what we need to update is who's populating the store, right? All these reducers. So we keep adding the reducers to the store. The provider provides everything that is in the store to all the components underneath. Okay. All right. Could I explain configure store? Yeah. So configure store. So configure store is responsible for collecting all the reducers into one single place, right? So that as they generate state, right, they all collate their state variables, their state objects into this one big store, right? And what happens is that the infrastructure, the React.js, the Redux infrastructure, what it'll do is that if the state changes, right, because somebody added something or removed something, what happens is that it will iterate over all the use selectors, right? We'll find all the use selectors. It will invoke them and will pass the new state here, where you can then pull out whatever changes happen, right? It will. So in this case, we have the counter2 has a use selector, counter1 has a use selector, the help Redux has hello Redux has a selector. It will iterate over all of them, passing the state with that is currently in the store. This is the state. We'll pass it. We'll pass that object. Okay, and then each one can just pick out what they want. Right. Can you explain about the action and reducer when you export? Action. You mean action? This action here? That action you mean? In the export part. Oh, this here. Yeah, so what happens is that these references to these functions are available in this slice, right, as part of the actions property. So these here are references to those are stored in the slice that gets created in the .actions, right? And so it's destructing that, it's destructing it, and declaring them as local constants, but then it's exporting those references out. Right? It's exporting it so that then in my counter, I can import them one at a time, right? I can import them because they're being exported. Here, reducers are declaring functions, or are they returning new objects of state? Are they declaring functions, or are they returning? So they are they declaring functions? Are they? Yeah, they're declaring functions. These are functions, right? These are functions that are updating the state, right? They're updating the state, and those changes, whenever somebody changes that state, right, the store gets recalculated of what's in the store, and then all the reducers are invoked. These selectors are invoked, and the new state is passed to everybody, and then each one picks out what they want. So if somebody calls it a increment 2, the increment 2 changes the state, right? Updates the state. So this then updates the store, updates all the store, and then the store gets passed to each one use selector, right, with all the new changes, and then you can pick out each piece that you want. Do you need the export default reducer part if you already export others? Do you need the this down here? So this is used for the store. The store needs to import those reducers. So this is used by these are used by the components, right, to import the functions. But this down here is used by the store so that I can import and create the store. In counter one reducer, counter one. Oh, no, you can't. No. You only get your own substate. You only get access to your own little state. You cannot go across. If you need to go, then you would declare it in the same reducer. You would declare this as an object, as opposed to just counter. You would declare an object in here.
Hello, Professor. So I had a question.
Yes.
So if we like there are two states that are dependent on one event change, right? Like, let's say count one and count two. And so we need to call two dispatch events. Like, can I call this one dispatch event of count one, which will be, calling a reducer that will be modifying states of two, like count one and count two both.
Yes, you can call multiple dispatches. Yes. Yeah. So here you could have you dispatch one and then you dispatch another in this as a one single transaction. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah. So let's move on. There's a couple of other examples. We already installed this. We did the hello reducer. We did the store. We did the provider. We did the counter example. Passing data to reducers using. So here's an example of an add reducer that passes attributes, right? So I'm going to leave that to you. Yeah. So let's take a look at a to-do component, right? That uses first we'll implement it using regular use state, right? And then we'll enhance it and make it available to the whole application, right? Using Redux, right? So let's implement to-dos. So if I go in my Redux examples, let's create a folder called to-dos. And in there, we're going to create a component called to-do list. Right? And my to-do list, let's paste that in there, and let's import it into my Redux examples here. Let's load the to-do list. So to-do list. There it is, right? And the to-do list allows, just displays a couple of to-dos. It allows you to add new to-dos, right? And you can type in whatever you want to add. So add, there's and adds it at the bottom, and then learn HTML, add learn CSS. I can add them, right? I can also delete elements, right? Or I can select, so I can edit it, right? And then update, and then it updates the correct one, and it clears the input field. So let's look at the implementation. So the implementation is fairly simple. It's just reusing all the stuff that we've seen so far, all the skills that we already are familiar with, right? So first, we declare two local state variables. One is called to-dos, which is an array, and whereas to-do is just an object, okay? So the array keeps track of the multiple to-do objects, which are fairly simple. You have just a primary key, so we can distinguish them, and the title that is going to display here in the to-dos. The to-do here just has a title, and it's used so that we can control the input field here, right? We can type something new, a new title. So I am updating it here, right? Then we have three functions that allow us to create new to-dos, delete to-dos, or update to-dos, which are the most common operations on any data structure, right? We want to CRUD, we want to create, read, update, and delete. Those are the four basic operations, right? And so the array of to-dos is used down here to iterate over the to-dos and render them as line items, and then two buttons that either invoke the delete of the to-do, right? Passes the ID of the to-do that I want to remove, or the other one allows it to select the to-do and just copies it here so that I can edit it. Okay, if I click on edit, it just copies this to do, the current to do in the loop. He copies it here so I can edit the title. Also, at the beginning of the line item, right, I have a little form where I can type new to do titles, right, in this input field, right, and as I type, I populate the title in the to do state variable, right? This one here, right? That's the new to do. And if I click on add, right, it takes that value and then it appends it, right? It appends it at the end of the array, calculating a new to-dos array, which includes the old to-dos plus my new to-do. Excuse me. And my new to-do is just going to copy the form elements that I've been editing, but it's going to add a new property that uniquely identifies this brand new to-do, right? So I update my to-dos, right, so that it shows the new to-do appended at the end. And then I clear the title here so that if I add, it clears it out. So ready for me to start typing the next one. Make sense? So that's for adding. For deletion, also pretty simple. What it does is that it iterates over the to-dos. You're passing me here the ID of the to-do that you want to remove. So I'm iterating over all the to-dos. I'm just going to skip over the to-dos, the to-do whose ID matches the ID of the to-do that I want to remove, right? So the new to-dos is just going to be one less to-do, right? And then I set the to-dos so that it can re-render. And finally, update to-do is a little bit more involved, right? So basically the way it works is that the new to-dos are just going to be, the same, it needs to update something. So for instance, if I select it, for edit, I'm going to change it. And when I say update, basically it needs to replace that old to-do with this new to-do with a new title, right? So the way it does is that it iterates over the existing array of to-dos, mapping over them. And for each item, it's asking, is this item equal to, the ID is equal to the to-do that I'm trying to update? If it is, I want to keep the new to-do, right? If it's not, right, I'm just going to keep the old to-do because you haven't changed it. You have only changed that one to-do. Okay. And then I set the new to-do so that it re-renders the array, and then I clear the title. So this is exactly what we did for the for the array example down here, right? This one here that we can add, right, and then we can delete. We didn't do an update here, but it's basically the same thing, right? So this is all in good. It's totally fine. The shortcoming is that I don't have access to these to-dos outside of the component, right? And the other shortcoming is that this is getting fairly complex, right? Several dozens of lines of code, and I might want to be able to break this up into multiple components, right? So for instance, we're going to break up this into another component and this into another component, right? So let's do that. So for instance, I like to remove this from here, right? And put it in a separate component. I'll call it the to-do item component, right? I'm going to paste it in here. I'm going to wrap it inside of a return, right? And then I'm going to wrap it again in a curly bracket, right? And this is going to be a function. And I'm going to call it to-do item, like that, right? And then I'm going to export it. And then I can bring back my to-do item here. Now the problem is that the to-do item, when I moved it over here, I kind of broke the dependency, right? Because the original DOM component, right, was expecting an item called to do, was expecting a function get to do, was expecting a delete to do, right? So we can pass them as properties, right? And then we can pass them here, right here, right? So it would be these here, right? Pass them all the references here and say that this is to do, right? delete to do, and set to do. Right? So we've recreated the dependency by passing references to the functions and objects that the sub element needs, right? And this works just the same, right? I can add more here, I can delete, right? I can edit. So it works the same way as before, right? But I've broken it out into a smaller component, which is great, right? Because I mean, this to-do item, even though right now we just have 2 buttons and a title, this could grow to be fairly complex, right? This could be, you know, a drop-down saying when this is due, right? Who's this assigned to? What is the status, right? So it could be, you know, check boxes and drop-downs and date pickers. So it could be fairly complex. So it's a very good practice in React.js, right? To whenever possible, you know, just wrap things in a component, put it in a separate file, right? So you can deal with complexity. All right, let's do the same thing with this li, right? We're going to break this out. And we're going to create a component called to-do form. Right, we're going to wrap this inside. There's going to be a return, and this is going to be a function, and this is called to-do form, like that, right? Then we export this to-do form, and we can bring back the to-do form here. This would be to-do form. There it is, right? But I have no dependencies, right? Because the to-do form was dependent on these functions, the add to do, the update to do, the set to do, the to do, right? So we need to recreate those dependencies, right? So there they are. And I need to pass them here, right? Let's see if my AI finds them, maybe, no? All right, didn't. So I'm just gonna copy them here. And so this is to do, and then add to do, and update to do. There we go. So basically I've recreated the dependency, right? And this now works the same way, right? Works exactly as if it was. Edit, I can change this, update, and it updates. So it works exactly the same way as before, applying best principles, right? Good practice that, you know, break out stuff, right? So that it's easy to manage, right? So you don't have so much clutter in here. Now but the problem is again, you know, I can't see these to-dos outside of the component, right? How can I share this with the rest of the world, right? Well, we're gonna convert this into a reducer, right? So let's so basically we're going to cut this out, cut it out like that. If I refresh, this is gonna break, right? Which is fine. So we're gonna create a reducer in here. We'll call it, you know, to-dos reducer, and in there we're going to put this function, this stuff here, so that, you know, just you know, as a inspiration. So yeah, so all this is going to become the initial state. So let's do that. So this will be initial state. It will be initial state. Going to be an object of to-dos is going to contain the array that. Okay, not the set to-dos. That's going to be separate. And no set to-dos. And then we have the to-do is going to be an object that contains the title, like that. And we're going to close that. Okay, we have that. We have the initial state. Now all these functions are going to be in the reducer, right? So we're going to create we'll create the slice. So import create slice from, there we go, from there. And we're going to create the slice. We're going to say, you know, const do slice, create the slice. We're going to name it, name to do. Here's the initial state and the reducer. So this is reducer. It's going to have all these functions in there. Right? We're going to have to massage them a little bit. Create reducer, blah, blah, blah. reducer. Oh, we need a parenthesis in here. There we go. So we're going to copy all these functions in here. They're almost what we need. So it's this is really colon here, and this is a comma. This is a colon in here, colon, and comma. This is a colon in here, and nothing there. There we go. Almost. Now these functions, really what they are is the state and action. Now in the action, we're going to pass in the state, the to-do, right? In the payload. Okay, so wherever you see the old to-dos, this becomes state.to-dos. Okay, wherever you see these, you're referring to these state objects, right? So this becomes state.to-do. ID, blah, blah, blah. New set new to-dos, add to-do. Oh, wait, no. State to-dos. Right, because we have been updating the to-do in the state to-do. So we don't need an action, do we? Wait a minute. Do we need an action? Yeah, right. That's the one we pass as an argument, no? Yeah, so no, this is not state action. This is action, that payload like that, right? Then this set to-dos is really state dot to-dos is equal to new to-dos. And then this is state dot to-do is equal to the empty, like that. Okay. So this is in the payload, right? So this is state dot action. So the ID is in there. So new to-dos is the state dot to-dos, filter to-do, and then this is the ID, which is in the payload. So action dot payload is the ID. And then we say, state dot to-dos is equal to new to-dos. Let's see, there's a question on the chat. To-dos are arrays of objects. So when we use spread operator here, it would do shallow copy. No, it always does deep copy. Yep. So to-do here, again, this is the payload, right? So the actual to-do that we're updating, the new version. So it's state.action. So new to-dos is this is state.to-dos. If I'm iterating over this, blah, 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 item. So this is the action that payload, right? And if it is, then I'm going to keep that payload. And this is state.to-dos is equal to new to-dos. Okay, and this is state.to-do is equal to the title. Okay, we export all these guys. We export the reducer. I think maybe we also need the set to do, huh? We probably need that too. So let's do that one too. So this is set to do. We're gonna pass in the state and the payload, perfect. And we're gonna export that too. We add it to the store. So this is the to-do reducer. We need to import it first. So import to-do reducer. And we add it here. That's all we need to do. So could you explain action payload again? Yeah, so all these deletes were receiving arguments, right? We're receiving the ID. This one was receiving the reference to the to-do that was being updated. This was being referencing the passed in the to-do that we were adding, right? So whatever is being passed to us, it's always going to be available in the action.payload. Okay, so action is kind of like a meta object that contains a lot of useful meta information that we don't really care. We only mostly care about the data that's being passed to us, right? It's like the event object. Remember, the event object had a lot of very interesting, useful properties in there. that we seldom use, right? We had the position of the mouse, whether we had a particular keystroke press, right? What time it was, right? Yeah, sure, all very useful, very interesting, but not very useful, right? So the only meta piece that we wanted was the target, right? Because the target had the value of, say, an input field or whether something was checked or not. So we mostly ignore everything else. So same thing here. Action has it's a meta object, right? We care about the payload that is being passed to us, and that's where it is in the payload. In the apt to do, we're being passed the to do that we're adding, so that's what I'm spreading, right? In the delete to do, we were passing the ID, so that's why I'm comparing against the ID that we're removing. In the update to do, we were passed the object that is being updated, right, with the new values, and that's why I use that to replace the item in the array. Okay. All right. So now that we've done that, it's in the store. We can go back to to-do list and start removing stuff here that we don't need. What do we need here really? Only the to-dos. That's all we need in here. This we're going to remove too. None of this is needed, right? All that is going to be available in the reducer, and that's the whole point here, that we are removing the dependencies because all that lives in the reducer now, right? So we remove that. We remove this. We don't need that anymore, right? And but we do need the to-dos. So let's get that from the reducer. So we'll do we'll need we need to import the use selector, and we can grab the to-dos. So we're saying, cons, the to-dos are in the reducer. Yeah, in the to-dos reducer. There we go. We have it. We're passing it in as an argument. And in here, we need to import all those functions from our reducer. So import dispatch, also import. We need, I think it's called to-dos reducer, right? This is to-dos reducer. Did I name it right? Yeah, to-dos reducer, right? And we need all these guys. So the to-do, we need the set to-do. What else do we need? Delete to-do. Is it the one? Are we exporting it? Are we exporting it? Yeah, we are, right? Why is it saying that? Oh, right here. We don't need this anymore. So we are removing those dependencies. We do need the, actually, no, we do need the to-do being passed to us. Actually, that's the only thing that we cannot remove the dependency, right? Because we're iterating over that in the parent, right? And we're passing each to-do. What else? In the form too, right? In the form, we have all these functions that we're no longer going to pass in. Instead, we're going to import them from Redux. Update to do. What else do we need? We need set to do also, right? Set to do as well. What else? To do form. We need, I guess, the to do as well. The to do. So this to do is the one in the reducer, not the one that we're iterating over, right? Export. It's not exported. Oh no, I'm sorry, no, not here, right? We do the selector. There we go, like that. There we go. I think we're almost done. Okay, so we are reading the to-dos from the reducer. It is rendering, but none of these guys works. None of these buttons work, right? And the reason is that we need the dispatcher for that, right? So let's bring the dispatcher. And we need to wrap all these in the dispatcher, right? So we say dispatch. We're going to nest this like that, right? All these calls needs to be wrapped inside a dispatcher. This too, like that. So that's the form. Let's see. Add. Oops. What happened? update add. Where's add? Here's add. Here's to do. Are we missing something? Let me add the dispatch to the other one as well. So let's import the dispatch. Like that. I'm going to wrap these with the dispatch. Wrap this with the dispatch. Okay. Let's see where it failed. Let me refresh. Add. Okay, what does it like? Let's see. Add to do is not a function. Ooh, add to do is not a function. How is it not a function? Add to do is this one. Add to do, there it is. And we have add to do. Yeah, it is a function. What do you mean it's not a function? Let me stop the server and restart. Maybe it's confused. Did we define in the store? I thought we did, didn't we? Here, there's to-dos reducer. There it is, right? Reducer is there. And we did export it. Add to do, delete to do, update to do. They're all there, right? Oh, no. Huh? To do slice, create slice, new reducer. Huh? These are not linked to that. Why? What? Why are they not linked? They're supposed to be linked. Why are they not linked? What's going on? Reducer, create slice, name to do, initial state, create slice, add to do.
I think it's reducers, the name.
Oh,
and create slice.
oh, reducers here? Oh, there they are. Thank you. Okay. Let's see. There we go. Thank you. Add. There we go. Right. And we can delete. Right. We can edit and update. Yeah, it works perfectly. Excellent. Good catch. So yeah, so now we've made it available. We've ripped out, all the state management from the original to-do list, right? And the to-do form. And now notice how trivial this is, right? The to-do list just wants to receive the to-do so that I can render them. And each one of them here, right, deals with their events irrespective of what the to-do list is doing. The to-do list is not responsible for maintaining any of the state, right? That's being done, that has been offloaded outside of here so that this component can focus on just rendering, only rendering, and reading the data so it can render, and then generating the events that update the state, okay, and notifying the centralized controller, hey, I'm adding something, I'm deleting something, I'm updating something, right? But it's not my responsibility. I'm just letting you know, right, that I would like to add a to-do, right? And I'll pass you the to-do that I want you to add, but it's your business on how you update whatever you need to update. Then you're going to notify me when those changes are done, and I'll just re-render them. See that? And now that I have those to-dos are available anywhere. So for instance, if I go to assignment 3, say, I can here, I already have a to-do list here, right? So say I go to my, again, let's go into the function destructing. So we go, function destructing. I can load my to-dos from a selector. There it is, right? And then here I can render it. I can say, JSON to-dos. There they are. See that? My to-dos are there. And so I can, so here's learn mode node. I can go here, edit it, lower node and express. I can update. If I go to summon 3, it's available there too. See that? It's available anywhere I want to share this information with. Make sense? All right. Yeah, so that's all I have for you today. So early next week, we're going to, first half of the lecture, we're going to review the exam. But in the second lecture, I'd like to expand on this, right, and discuss how you would use this for the Canvas, right, and you'll find that a lot of what we're doing here in the manipulating this array data structure is applicable, right, equally for, right, for instance, if you want to edit the array of courses, like for instance, in the dashboard, basically it's just an editor of an array of courses, right? You can add a course, you can remove course, you can edit a course, right? You can retrieve the courses for rendering. Same thing when you go to assignments, same thing, right? You have an array of assignments, right? And you can edit the array of assignments. You can add an assignment, remove an assignment, update and so basically the 4 CRUD operations. I want to be able to create, I want to be able to retrieve or read, update or delete, right? Those are the 4 basic operations, and you should, architect your applications, based on these affordances, right? On these operations, right? You want to group together the data structures that have a common set of features or operations. Okay. We are a group that emailed you about meeting class. Sure. Yep. Yeah. So I'm done. Let's. I hope you all have a great weekend. I am going to meet with some folks that from a team that is want to discuss their project, and you're welcome to stick around or and have a great weekend. All right, Hypnos Wu.
Hi, Professor.
Hi, how you doing? How can I
Good.
help you?
So my group members should be here too. We have a project proposal done already, and have the UI design ready. So we just wanted to show you that and see if you could provide any suggestions on how we can improve our UI design or the process, I guess, how we can work together, and also version control on Git.
All right, go ahead. Want to share your screen?
Okay, yeah. Give me 1 second. Okay. Can you see my?
Yes. Let me move it here.
So we are doing a website that is like a kind of Reddit, but it focuses on entertainment related titles like movies, books, games, and then users can post their thoughts or discussions, reviews on a certain title, and then people can comment and stuff on it. It's basically a Reddit.
Okay.
As you can see, the homepage here, we can still make some modifications on the layout. But that's the basic look of it.
Okay.
And then we have the following is just when you log in, and then it will show a following button that a user can click on to see, the users they're following, what they're posting specifically. And then the sign up page. And then we have the profile page. People can modify their user profiles. Search results is just basically it's going to post the results, and then the post details, whenever users click on a post, what they will see, a picture, and then.
So when you search, what are you searching?
Well, I guess you can search for a specific user or a post.
So what is your remote your remote API?
We haven't entirely decided on what we're using, but we are probably going with the MERN stack. That's what we're thinking.
No, I mean, where are you pulling data from?
I don't think we have decided on that.
So one of the top and main requirements, and I think one of the hardest things and challenging things is being able to interact with a third-party API, right? That should have most of the data that you're going to be dealing with, so that, right? So for the examples that I give in the project is, for instance, if you're doing a music application, then you need a place that has a collection of music objects, right? Albums or songs or whatever, right? And so in your case, it might be news, right? Or for a particular topic, right, of discussion. And then you could say, I discuss this celebrity, or want to discuss, right, any particular news item, and then your search would go out to a particular news agency that you can choose. That there's tons of them that provide an API, and they would return, articles or content with titles, and that then you could start discussing about, right? Or it could be a particular artist that you want to discuss, and then that would be the object around which you discuss. And people say, oh, did you check out the latest whatever from this person, and then you can chat about it, and maybe it was some controversial opinion from somebody, and then you discuss around that opinion, and people can post and reply and whatever, right? And so, but you have to choose what it is that you are building around. You need to identify first what is that third-party API around which you are creating this network.
I'm not sure if we're going to be using that, because we are not. So, for example, we could use the IMDb API, I guess, to get their data on movies. But
yeah, could be.
Yeah, but since we're going to be a user content generated center, I suppose we're only using our own users' data. So we're just going to be using our own database to store what they're posting instead of outsourcing third party.
No, that absolutely. Any posts or any data about users, that definitely is in your database. So that this doesn't change. Of course that all your data lives in your database of who's who, and all the articles that they've posted, any posts that they've made, all that lives in your database. Yes, absolutely, that is a requirement. But the things you talk about, right, the topics that you talk about, usually is around a particular topic. Although, I mean, yours could be, you could choose maybe entertainment, right? I'm just concerned that somebody is going to come here, right? And you're not going to have enough information to make this interesting. If I come here and I type and search, a topic that you don't have any data for, say I go in and look for, I don't know, Starlink, right? And no one has posted anything about Starlink, right? I'm not going to find anything. Or if I type I don't know, quantum mechanics, nobody's going to have spoken anything about quantum mechanics, right? So you're not going to find any content that anybody has generated anything about it.
I see.
Whereas if you have some third-party API that has a large data set, right, of articles and content that has been created by, many years by a large community, then you can piggyback on that, right? And then that data integrated into yours, right? So that if I search something, the results are not yours, they're somebody else's. So for instance, if I do say and search quantum mechanics, it would appear, Albert Einstein didn't believe in quantum mechanics and blah, 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 whatever. And then I would see if anybody has posted anything about that, perhaps, below it saying, oh, by the way, somebody did post an opinion about that particular topic, right? But if nobody has posted it, I still have content. I can still, review the article. I can say, I can make a discussion. Somebody that also searches for quantum mechanics will find what I posted, right? And then we can enter a discussion, an argument around that topic. Now, obviously, if you do have a match of somebody, someone did post something about a particular search string, then sure, by all means, include that in the search results, right? As a suggestion, as saying, oh, somebody did post something about that. But make it so that it's a large data set that you can tap into, so that if I'm a lot of people want to make an application about food, but I don't want to use a third-party API, and says, well, what if I look for a recipe for a dish that is not in your database, right? It's going to be a very boring database.
Yeah. So
try to look for ways that you can tap into a large data set.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good suggestion. Thank you so much. Okay. Do you have any suggestions on version control? Because we have never worked together as a group before it's probably gonna look messy.
Yeah, it's hard. So yeah, you're gonna have to create a Git repository and include everybody, and use a single repository. And so the owner is going to invite all the others as collaborators, and basically, the mantra here is to try and stay as up to date of whatever everybody else is doing as possible. And for that, you need a lot of communication. The first thing you should do in the morning is do a Git pull, right? Pull to see if I get everybody else's work. And when I do a commit, right? Actually, I do a pull and merge the changes that everybody else has into my stuff, right? Make sure that I have everybody else. And then when I push my changes, I notify everybody else and say, hey, everybody, I've pushed this part. Make sure that you pull on your end, to make sure that you have the latest stuff that I have, right? And try to avoid you diverging too much. Like, you work on something for 3, 4, 5 days, you don't tell anybody, right? And then when you're going to push, it collides with some stuff that somebody else was doing. So it's very, very common that people don't collaborate, they don't talk, they work on their little silos, and then when they're going to put it together, you've overwritten stuff that I have written, right? Ideally, each one works on things that are very separate from each other, but oftentimes you're going to have stuff that is shared, that we all have to touch this file. So you have to be very, very careful, right? To always pull first, make sure that I have everybody else's latest stuff, because people are telling me, hey, I push later, I push, right? And people are pulling, making sure that I have the latest from everybody. So that when I push, right, I'm going to be very, very close to have the latest from everybody else's. So I'm not going to collide with anybody else's change, right? So that's my suggestion.
Okay.
I would tell you to use feature branches, but I think you're going to be very confused.
We could try. Last question. We just need some suggestions on how we should start our project. Like, should we start on the front end first, or from the back end database, or?
I would do the front end first.
Uh-huh.
Because that's going to dictate how you want the data to be. It's going to dictate the data that you need, and then that's going to inform how how it's going to be divvied up into what screens. As you navigate from one to the other, it's going to divvy up and say, well, what data do I want from here to here, right? What are the relationships between the pieces of data? And you can hard code all the data right now. You can hard code the data and start using, creating the user interface like we did for dashboard, right? And for Canvas, we hard coded all those arrays. Yes.
Mhm.
Now, ideally, this data is data that is representative from the API that you're going to retrieve the data from. Start from there. I would start, see what data is available in these in the API that you choose.
Mhm.
And so that you're as compatible as possible to whatever they are providing, right? And somebody was asking, can third-party APIs be used for anonymous browsing content so that they are not linked to our local database completely? So half of that is true. Yes, you should use it for anonymous browsing. So even if you're not logged in, you should be able to use the third-party API and browse through the content. And I don't have to log in to be able to browse that. But when you're going to create content, right, and say you're looking at an article or a movie or a song, and you like it, then you need to log in and create the relationship saying that this person likes that song, right? And that lives in your database. You'll need a representation of that object, right? Maybe it's a song and it has lyrics and it has all sorts of stuff. And you'll probably only need maybe the ID of the foreign key of the object that you want to remember that somebody liked, maybe the title of the song or the article, whatever, maybe the heading, and maybe an image, right? Maybe a thumbnail or something. And that is what gets stored in your database, right? You can always recreate that article or movie or song or recipe or whatever with the ID, right? With the ID, you can always navigate and go fetch that object later from that third-party API, so you can re-render it in your screen.
Mhm. Thank you.
Okay.
I think that's. Oh,
So I'm
one
going
last.
to demonstrate. I'm going to demonstrate this when we come back after the first exam.
Uh-huh.
I will demonstrate how all this would work.
Okay. One last question that just popped up in my mind. So because we're gonna have a lot of posts in our database, do you think we should assign an ID to each post, or is it not necessary? Just use the title.
Oh no, absolutely. You should. Everything should have a unique identifier.
Okay. Yeah. And should we make a function to auto generate an ID, or?
No, your database will do that for you.
Got it. Okay. Thank you so much, Professor. I think that's all the questions we have.
Okay. Good luck.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.